Imagine an 8-year-old boy, pale as winter moonlight, who never blinks when someone screams. In the summer of 1867, 3 graves were dug in Sedalia County, Missouri, and every single one pointed back to a child whose smile never reached his eyes. This is the story the church itself tried to bury, because some darkness has no name in Scripture. 3 heartbeats of silence. Then a single church bell cracks in the distance. The year is 1867. The war is over, but Missouri is still bleeding. Fields that once fed armies now lie fallow, choked with thistle and guilt. In the low valley south of Sedalia, the air hangs heavy with wood smoke and the sour smell of unburied things. Men limp home, missing arms, missing brothers, missing mercy. And into this wounded land steps an 8-year-old boy carrying nothing but a small cloth bag and eyes the color of river ice. His name is Timothy Caldwell, and by the time the leaves turned that autumn, the oldest people in Pettis County would swear, quietly behind locked doors, that something walked into their midst wearing the skin of a child, something that had already learned the taste of death long before it ever arrived. But let us begin where the darkness always begins, with ordinary grief. The Caldwell farm sits 15 miles south of town, cradled in a hollow where the morning fog clings like a shroud. Once, it had been a proud place, whitewashed fences, fat cattle lowing at dusk. Then came Wilson's Creek in '61. James Caldwell rode away with the Missouri State Guard and never rode back. His widow Martha lasted 4 more winters, coughing blood into lace handkerchiefs until consumption finally claimed her in the cruel January of 1865. Their eldest son Thomas inherited the land, the debts, and a heart that had calcified somewhere between Shiloh and loneliness. Thomas was 26 when a letter came from Georgia. His younger brother William, captured at Pea Ridge, starved at Andersonville, had died screaming in a stockade ditch. William's wife followed him into the grave a month later, taken by the same camp fever. Only one thing remained: an 8-year-old son named Timothy, now orphaned twice over. So in the spring of 1866, a thin, fair-haired boy stepped down from the stagecoach in Sedalia, clutching a flour sack valise and staring at the world like someone counting exits. Thomas Caldwell met him with the grim courtesy of a man who has already buried too many dreams. His wife, Sarah, childless, sharp-tongued, cheeks hollowed by years of silent resentment, looked the boy over once and said nothing at all. That first night, Timothy slept in the loft above the kitchen. Sarah later told the preacher's wife that she lay awake listening to the child breathe, steady, unhurried, like a clock that had forgotten how to be afraid. He was small for his age, skin so pale it seemed translucent in lamplight, veins faint blue beneath, hair the color of harvested wheat, kept brutally short because Sarah hated lice more than she hated children. But it was the eyes that unsettled people most, pale winter sky blue, ringed with a darker rim, and utterly still. Most children's eyes dart like minnows. Timothy's eyes waited. He never cried. Not when Thomas took a strap to him for spilling milk. Not when Sarah locked him outside in the rain for forgetting to latch the hen house. He simply looked up, always up, with that calm, measuring stare, and said, "Yes, ma'am," or "No, sir," in a voice soft as falling ash. Within a week, the neighbors noticed something else. The boy worked like a man twice his age. From the first gray of dawn until the stars came out, Timothy hoed, milked, fed the hogs, hauled water, never slowing, never daydreaming, never once sneaking off to fish or chase grasshoppers like normal boys. Old Mrs. Eleanora Patterson, whose land butted against the Caldwells, watched him from her porch one blistering July afternoon and felt the hairs rise on her arms. "He don't play," she whispered to her husband that night. 8 years old and ain't got a lick of play in him. It's like watching a little clockwork man made of bone and silence. Even the animals felt it. The Patterson chickens, normally greedy, stupid things, would cluster at the far corner of their run when Timothy passed the fence line, feathers puffed, eyes wide with dumb terror. The Caldwell mule refused to take an apple from the boy's hand. It would pin its ears and back away as if the fruit were poisoned. And the farm dogs, Three half-wild curs that snarled at every stranger simply vanished whenever Timothy stepped into the yard. They'd be found later, trembling under the porch, tails tucked so tight they whimpered. Dr. Samuel Harding first laid eyes on the boy in June of 1866. Harding was 42, St. Louis trained, one of the only men west of the Mississippi who'd read Phir and still believed in both science and scripture. He'd sewn up boys with their faces shot away at Wilson's Creek. He'd held the hands of mothers dying of childbed fever while their infants wailed in the next room. He thought he'd seen every shade of human sorrow. Then he met Timothy Caldwell. It was a Saturday market day. Thomas had brought the boy to town for salt and coffee. Harding was weighing a farmer's child for signs of marasmus when he felt the gaze, cool, incurious, absolute, settle on the back of his neck. He turned. 10 yards away, Timothy stood beside the wagon, hands folded politely in front of him, staring. Not the shy glance of a country child. Not the bold stare of a bully. Something else. Harding would write that night by candle stub. The boy regarded me the way I regard a cadaver on the table. Clinical, thorough, devoid of either cruelty or compassion. There was no fear in him, no curiosity about the world of adults, no flicker of ordinary childhood at all. Only observation, as if he were taking notes for a report he intended to deliver later to someone else. The first death came on the 14th of August, 1866. The hottest day anyone could remember. Heat shimmered above the fields like a lie. Cicadas screamed until your ears rang with them. Little Mary Fletcher, 5 years old, red curls, laughed like wind chimes, had slipped away from her mother while chasing butterflies near Willow Creek. The creek was shallow, sluggish, no more than 18 inches deep in late summer. Children played there every day. Timothy found her. He came walking up the dusty track to the Fletcher forge just as the family sat down to supper, clothes soaked to the knees, face pale but composed. "Mr. Fletcher," he said in that soft, even voice, "your Mary is in the creek. She's not breathing no more." They ran. The blacksmith, his wife, half the town, boots pounding red clay, hearts already knowing. They found her floating face down among the arrowweed. Her yellow dress billowed like a drowned flower. A single dragonfly hovered above her curls, then darted away. Dr. Harding arrived 20 minutes later, sweat-soaked, medical bag slapping his thigh. Official cause, accidental drowning. But Harding knelt in the mud and saw things the others missed. Mary's tiny fingers were curled as if clutching something that was no longer there. There were faint bruises on both upper arms, 4 small ovals on each side, the exact span of a child's hands. And when they turned her over, her eyes were open, staring straight up at the merciless sun, as if even in death she was trying to understand why the light had gone cold. Timothy stood a respectful distance away, hands clasped, head bowed. When Mrs. Fletcher collapsed screaming into her husband's arms, the boy did not flinch. When the blacksmith fell to his knees and clawed at the mud until his nails bled, Timothy watched without expression. Later, at the inquest, the boy's story was flawless. He'd been sent to find a missing calf. He'd heard a splash. He'd run to the creek and seen Mary floating. He'd waded in, tried to pull her out, but she was already limp. So he ran for help. Thomas Caldwell confirmed the calf had indeed strayed. The calf was found 2 days later, fat and unconcerned, grazing in a meadow a mile away. No one thought to ask why an 8-year-old sent on a simple errand had wandered so far off the logical path, or how he'd managed to hear a splash over the roar of cicadas from 100 yards away. At Mary's funeral 3 days later, the little church was packed tight with sweating, black-clad mourners. The scent of wilting lilies and despair. Timothy sat between his uncle and aunt, hands folded in his lap, head bowed in perfect imitation of grief. Mrs. Eleanora Patterson sat 3 pews back. She would later swear on her own grave that when Mary's mother fainted dead away, when strong men wept openly into their handkerchiefs, Timothy Caldwell lifted his head just once. His lips curved, barely, not in sorrow, not in fear, but in the faintest, coldest suggestion of a smile. as if he were checking to see whether the performance had moved the audience exactly as intended. And somewhere high in the rafters, a single mourning dove cooed once, then fell silent, as though it, too, had seen something it could not unsee. The summer was only beginning, and the land itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what walked among them, wearing the face of a child. October wind came early to Pettis County in 1866, rattling the last dry leaves like bones in a box. The nights grew long and sharp, and in the abandoned limestone cave 2 miles behind the Caldwell farm, something was learning how pain worked. Dr. Samuel Harding stood at the mouth of that cave on an afternoon so still the smoke from his pipe hung in the air like a ghost refusing to leave. He had followed a trail of blood, 3 drops, bright and fresh, through frostbitten grass. The entrance was narrow, half hidden by cedar and poison ivy. Inside, the temperature dropped 10 degrees and the light died. He struck a match, and the world tilted. The walls were covered. Hundreds of drawings, charcoal, berry juice, blood, pinned with hand-whittled thorns. Rabbits with their bellies laid open while still breathing. Squirrels crucified on twigs. A barn cat with its ribs spread like wings, eyes replaced by black X's. Every sketch labeled in a child's perfect copperplate. Subject remained conscious 9 minutes after removal of hind legs. Whimpering ceased when pressure applied to throat. Another bird with wings clipped attempted flight 47 times before exhaustion. Heart continued beating 4 minutes after decapitation. But it was the newest sheets, pinned higher, fresher, that stole Harding's breath. Human figures. Mary Fletcher, yellow dress floating, mouth open in a silent scream underwater. Henrik Lynn, body twisted at the base of Devil's Bluff, bees drawn in perfect formation around the corpse. Jacob Mills, tiny limbs splayed at the bottom of a well, annotated with arrows. Day 3, voice reduced to croak. Day 4, no movement, dehydration complete. And at the bottom of each drawing, the same calm signature. T. Caldwell, age 8. Harding's hands shook so violently the match burned his fingers. He lit another, and another. In the farthest recess he found the instruments. A paring knife honed to a razor, a spool of baling twine, a row of sewing needles threaded with horsehair, and a small tin box containing 23 animal eyes floating in alcohol, preserved like grotesque marbles. He stumbled out into daylight and vomited behind a cedar tree until his ribs ached. That night he began writing in earnest, 3 leather journals filling with ink and dread. He no longer slept. He measured his own pulse and found it racing at the mere thought of the boy's pale, unblinking face. Because Timothy Caldwell was still perfect. Every Sunday, he sat ramrod straight in the 3rd pew of Mount Zion Church, hands folded, reciting the Apostles' Creed without a single stumble. He passed the collection plate with solemn grace. When Preacher Davies spoke of the innocence of children, "Except ye become as little children, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven," Timothy bowed his head as though the verse had been written expressly for him. And the killings continued, quieter now, more elegant. 17 of Mrs. Patterson's chickens were found on successive mornings, necks snapped with surgical precision. 1 twist, 1 click, no feathers out of place. James Wickham lost 3 calves. 1 Garrett with its own halter rope knotted so expertly it looked self-inflicted. Another with its tongue swollen black from hemlock leaves forced down its throat. The 3rd simply gone, until they found it 3 days later wedged headfirst in a fence gap no calf should ever have entered, eyes wide, still chewing grass. Every farm within a 3-mile radius bled livestock, and every farmer had seen the same polite little boy waving from the fence line the day before disaster struck. "He's such a good child," they'd say, uneasy even as the words left their mouths. "Works like a grown man, never complains, always asks after your health." Harding began visiting the Caldwell farm daily after Thomas threw his back out, lifting a plow. Thomas lay flat on a straw tick, dosed with laudanum and self-pity, while Sarah hovered like a nervous crow. Timothy was always there, silent, helpful, bringing cool cloths, measuring medicine with steady hands. During those long afternoons, Harding studied the boy the way a biologist studies a new species of viper. Timothy asked questions, not the questions of a child. Dr. Harding, when a man's lungs fill with blood, does he taste iron before he drowns? Or, if you cut the tendons behind the knee, how far can a person crawl before the pain makes them lie down? Or, softly, while stirring Thomas's willow bark tea, do little girls feel it more than little boys, do you think? Their nerves are smaller. He asked the way a carpenter asks about grain, curious which way the wood will split. Harding began lying on purpose, feeding false anatomy, impossible symptoms. Timothy absorbed every lie without challenge, storing it like ammunition. One evening in late November, snow threatening in the iron-gray sky, Harding asked the boy to walk with him to the barn to check on a lame mare. They stood among the smells of hay and horse sweat, lantern light flickering across cobwebs and rusted scythes. Harding's voice was steady, though his heart hammered hard enough to crack a rib. "I was in your cave, Timothy." For the first time in all their acquaintance, the boy blinked. Then he waited. "I saw the drawings," Harding continued. "Mary, Henrik, Jacob, the rabbits, the eyes in the jar." Silence, so complete they could hear the mare's tail swish against the stall. Timothy tilted his head, bird-like. "You won't tell," he said. "Not a plea. A diagnosis." "And why is that?" Harding asked, genuinely needing to understand. The boy stepped closer, close enough that Harding smelled the faint sweetness of Sarah's lye soap on his skin. "Because they'll lock you away." "Not me. Grown men cry too easily. Doctor, they'll say the war broke your mind. They'll say you imagined it all." A pause. "And because you want to watch." Harding felt the truth of it like a scalpel sliding between his ribs. He didn't want to watch. God help him, he did. Timothy smiled then, the first real smile Harding had ever seen on his face. It was beautiful and ancient and utterly empty. "How long?" Harding whispered. Timothy considered. "I was 5 when I understood that things stop moving if you make them hurt enough. Insects first, then the neighbor's cat that kept having kittens. Mama cried when they disappeared. She thought a hawk took them." He shrugged, small shoulders moving under homespun. "People are slower, but the sound are better." Harding's knees buckled. He caught himself on a stall post. Timothy watched the reaction with clinical interest. "I used to pray," the boy said conversationally. "Every night after Papa went to the war. I asked God to make the hurting stop inside me. He never answered. So I decided he isn't there, or he likes it." Snow began to fall outside the open barn door. Fat, silent flakes drifting through the lantern light like ash from a burning world. Timothy reached up and touched Harding's coat sleeve, gentle as any loving child. "You should write it all down, Doctor. Every detail. When I'm grown, people will want to know how it began." Then he walked back toward the house, small boots leaving perfect prints in the new snow. Prints that filled almost as quickly as they were made, as if the earth itself wanted to forget he had ever passed that way. Harding stood in the barn until the lantern burned out. He never confronted Thomas or Sarah. He never went to the sheriff. He simply kept writing, page after page of meticulous observation, while the journals grew heavier and his soul grew lighter, the way a man feels lighter after cutting off a gangrenous limb. Because some truths are so terrible that speaking them aloud only gives them wings. And winter was coming. In the cave, new sheets of paper waited. The night before the world ended, Dr. Samuel Harding did not sleep. He sat at his roll-top desk in Sedalia, 3 journals open like gutted birds, pages trembling under lamplight. Every drawing, every note, every measured heartbeat of Timothy Caldwell stared back at him. Outside, a cold November rain slashed the windows, and the wind sounded like children crying far away. At 3:17 a.m., he wrote a single line in the margin of his final journal. "If I fail tomorrow, burn these books. Some knowledge is a sin to keep." By dawn, he was riding south with Sheriff William Crawford and 3 deputies, hard men who had survived Quantrill's raiders and Bloody Bill Anderson. They carried Spencer rifles, Navy revolvers, and a sick certainty that they were about to arrest a child for murder. The plan was simple on paper. Harding would enter the farmhouse at the usual hour with his medical bag. Inside, vials of laudanum strong enough to drop a mule. He would dose Thomas and Sarah deeper into sleep, rendering them useless as hostages or victims. Crawford and his men would take positions in the barn, the smokehouse, the cedar thicket, close enough to storm the house in seconds. But plans are fragile things when the opponent has spent years studying how living creatures break. The Caldwell farm appeared through the rain like a ship abandoned by God. No smoke rose from the chimney. No uske. The yard dogs were gone. Even the pigs were silent. Harding's boots had barely touched the mud when the front door opened. Timothy stood on the threshold in clean Sunday trousers and a white shirt rolled to the elbows. His forearms were pink from scrubbing. His pale hair was slicked down with water. He looked freshly baptized. "Good morning, doctor," he said, soft and welcoming. "I've been waiting." The words landed like a coffin lid closing. Harding stepped inside. The house smelled of boiled willow bark, lye soap, and something sweeter, greener, crushed hemlock leaves steeping in tea. Thomas and Sarah lay side by side on their rope bed, blankets tucked to their chins with unnatural neatness. Their chests rose and fell in slow, drugged rhythm. A half-empty cup sat on the bedside table. Two cups, actually, one overturned, as if someone had knocked it away too late. Timothy closed the door behind Harding with the gentle click of a trap. "They won't wake up," the boy said conversationally, wiping his hands on a dish towel, though they were already spotless. "I used water, hemlock, and a little nightshade. Paralysis comes first, then the lungs forget their job." Very peaceful to watch. Harding's medical bag felt suddenly heavy as sin. "What did you give them?" he asked, voice flat. "Only what grows wild. Nature is generous to children who pay attention." Timothy moved to the window, peeking through the calico curtain at the gray morning. "Your friends are in the barn," he said without turning. "Deputy Mitchell smells like chewing tobacco and horse sweat. Sheriff Crawford's boots need oiling. They squeak on the third stair of the loft." The third man climbed the cedar tree. He shouldn't have. Branches break. He faced Harding again, and for the first time the mask slipped entirely. The polite child was gone. Something older looked out through those winter blue eyes, something that had watched the first murder on Earth and taken notes. "Shall we talk, doctor? We have hours before they die." Timothy sat in Sarah's rocking chair, folded his small hands in his lap, and began to lecture. He spoke the way other boys recited multiplication tables. Mary Fletcher had taken 2 minutes and 47 seconds to stop kicking once her face was underwater. She had tried to scream with lungs already full and made the most fascinating bubbling sound. He had held her by the braids, because hair gives excellent leverage. Henrik Len had been heavier, so Timothy loosened the stones the night before, then harvested 2 pounds of angry bees in a flour sack. When the old man climbed the bluff, Timothy screamed, "Swarm!" and flung the sack into his face. Henrik stumbled backward exactly 4 steps, Timothy counted, before the edge gave way. The next snap was instantaneous, but the bees kept stinging the corpse for nearly 20 minutes. He had watched from above, timing everything with his uncle's old pocket watch. Jacob Mills had been the masterpiece. For days of controlled decline, Timothy brought him exactly 6 ounces of water each morning, just enough to keep the heart fluttering. Jacob begged on the second day, offered to be Timothy's brother forever if he'd only pull him up. On the third day, he tried a bargain with God. On the fourth, he only whispered, "Mama," until the word lost meaning. Timothy's voice never wavered. He might have been reading a recipe for apple butter. "And now," he said, rising, "I want to try something new." He moved around the room, gathering tools the way a surgeon lays out instruments. A coil of new rope, Sarah's skinning knife, Thomas's straight razor, freshly stropped, a wooden spoon for prying teeth apart, a Bible. He placed it deliberately on the table, opened a job. "I want to know what a man does when he understands exactly what's coming. Animals panic. Children cry. But you, doctor, you know every nerve I cut, every bone I break. You'll feel it coming the way a condemned man feels the noose being measured." He smiled, and the room temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. "Will you beg?" Will you bargain? Will you damn your soul to save theirs? He gestured toward the bed where Thomas and Sarah lay dying by inches. Or will you try to shoot me and discover I counted your bullets before you ever left town? Harding's hand went to the Navy Colt inside his bag. Timothy's eyes tracked the motion like a cat watching cream. 6 rounds, the boy said. Uncle Thomas, Aunt Sarah, yourself, Sheriff Crawford, Deputy Mitchell, Deputy Cole in the tree. Exactly 6 people you love or swore to protect. I practiced the math. He stepped closer, barefoot on the puncheon floor, leaving no sound. I was born wrong, he whispered, almost tenderly. I used to pray about it. Every night in Andersonville, when the guards made us watch them burn the new prisoners' feet. I prayed for the empty place inside me to fill up. It never did, so I decided God made me this way on purpose. A test, or a joke. He picked up the straight razor, tested the edge against his thumb. A bead of blood welled, bright, perfect child's blood. Your move, doctor. The moment shattered. Harding drew the Colt and thumbed the hammer. Timothy moved faster than 8 years should allow. Low and fluid, knife already flashing. The blade opened Harding's left forearm from wrist to elbow, parting sleeve and flesh with surgical grace. Pain exploded white-hot. Harding fired. The bullet punched through Timothy's right shoulder, spinning him half around, but the boy only laughed. A high, delighted sound like breaking glass. He came again, razor reversed for a killing stroke. Harding clubbed him across the temple with the pistol barrel. Timothy went down hard, blood pouring from scalp and shoulder, but his eyes stayed open, shining, ecstatic. They fought like animals across the bedroom floor, grown man and demon child, crashing into furniture, splintering the washstand, knocking the Bible to the floor where it fell open to the page that reads, Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Boots pounded on the porch. The door burst inward. Sheriff Crawford and his deputies stormed in with rifles raised. Timothy rolled to his feet, drenched in blood, his own and Harding's grinning through red teeth. Deputy Mitchell lunged to seize him. Timothy let himself be taken. He went limp, docile, the perfect little boy again, until the exact moment Mitchell's grip relaxed a fraction. Then he twisted, snatched the deputy's own knife from his belt, and drove it upward under the ribs with both small hands. Mitchell gasped, eyes wide, and folded to the floor. Chaos. Crawford fired point-blank into Timothy's chest. The impact lifted the boy off his feet and threw him against the wall beside the bed. He slid down slowly, leaving a bright red comet on the whitewash. For one heartbeat, the room was perfectly still. Then Timothy looked up at Harding, through the smoke, through the blood, and smiled with childish sweetness. Thank you, doctor, he whispered. Now I know. Even when you see it coming, you still scream. His head fell forward. The light in those winter-blue eyes went out like a snuff candle. Deputy Mitchell died on the way to town. Thomas and Sarah never woke. The hemlock finished its work an hour later. Dr. Samuel Harding lived another 11 years. He never practiced medicine again. Every night he sat at his desk with the 3 journals and a bottle of laudanum he never quite found the courage to drink. On the flyleaf of the final volume he wrote, in handwriting that grew shakier with each passing year, I looked into the abyss, and the abyss looked back with the face of child, and asked me why I had taken so long to understand that some souls are stillborn. In 1878, the Sedalia County Courthouse burned to the ground. The official records of Timothy Caldwell vanished in the flames, but the journals survived. They were found in 1974 by a graduate student doing research on post-war trauma. She read 3 pages and immediately fed all 3 volumes into the university incinerator. Some stories, she later told her thesis advisor, are doors, and some doors must stay nailed shut. The morning Timothy Caldwell disappeared, the Missouri State Hospital for the Insane woke to perfect silence. No screams from the violent ward. No clatter of breakfast trays. Only the wind moving through barred windows like a priest who had forgotten the words to an exorcism. Orderlies found his room exactly as it had been the night before. Bed made with hospital corners sharp enough to cut, chamber pot empty, window latched from the inside. On the wall, freshly scratched with a smuggled nail, one sentence. I was never the patient. You were. Timothy Caldwell, age 9.5, had simply stepped out of the world. They searched for weeks. Bloodhounds followed a trail that ended at the Missouri River and never began again. The official report, signed, sealed, and quietly buried, called it escape by unknown means. Dr. Samuel Harding read the words and laughed until he wept blood into his handkerchief. Because he knew Timothy had not escaped. He had graduated. For 18 months the boy had lived among the mad, studying them the way a sparrow studies the hawk, learning which screams were real, which tears could be sold, which doctors still believed in God. He cataloged every guard's weakness. Orally Phelps drank after his shift. Nurse Whitcomb pitied pretty children. Dr. Fitzgerald wanted so badly to be the one who cured evil that she would forgive anything that looked like progress. And on the night of July 17th, 1868, while lightning stitched the sky above Fulton, Missouri, Timothy Caldwell walked out wearing Orderly Phelps's uniform coat, carrying Nurse Whitcomb's keys, and leaving behind Dr. Fitzgerald's career in smoking ruins. He was never seen again, but he was felt. Oh yes, like frost on a grave, he was felt. In 1871, a traveling preacher in Topeka found his entire congregation of 23 dead in their pews, necks broken with identical precision, hymnals open to Nearer My God to Thee, a child's perfect handprint in blood on every Bible. In 1870, a wealthy widow in St. Louis adopted a solemn, blue-eyed orphan who helped around the house with angelic devotion. 6 months later, she was discovered flayed and arranged across her dining table like a red tablecloth, silverware placed neatly at throat and wrists. The boy had vanished, along with her jewelry and every photograph of herself. In 1879, a Kansas railroad detective chased a polite young man suspected of pushing hobos from moving trains to see how far the body travels before the wheels catch it. The suspect vanished from a locked boxcar between stations. Inside, scratched on the wall in the same childish copperplate. Distance equals 47 yards on average. Thank you for the ride. Dr. Harding followed the trail the way other men follow whiskey, until it killed him. He kept a private map on the wall of his study, red pins blooming across the Midwest like smallpox. Each pin marked a death too neat, an accident too perfect, a child seen smiling where no child should have been. In 1883, he received a package postmarked Omaha. Inside, a single human finger bone, adult male, polished white, wrapped in a sheet of paper covered in the same careful handwriting he had first seen in a limestone cave 17 years earlier. Dear Dr. Harding, the adult form is less convincing, but the access is exquisite. I have begun testing longevity now. How slowly can a man die, while still believing he is being saved? I remain your most devoted student. T.C. P.S. Burn this. Harding did not burn it. He added the bone to a small cedar box that already contained a lock of Mary Fletcher's red hair, one dead bee from Devil's Bluff, a rabbit's I preserve in alcohol, and the straight razor Timothy had used the day the farmhouse became a slaughterhouse. He kept the box on his desk and stared at it every evening while the laudanum trembled in his glass. In the winter of 1891, Harding's heart finally gave out. His daughter found him slumped forward, face down on the open journal, the cedar box clutched to his chest like a newborn. His last written words, scrawled across an entire page in letters that grew larger and wilder, read, "He is not an aberration. He is the future, when empathy becomes optional. And intelligence is the only God left. Every Timothy will walk free, and every cradle will rock over an abyss. Pray the next one learns to cry convincingly." The Missouri Historical Society received the journals in 1923, sealed with black wax and a note from Harding's daughter. My father begged me to burn these. I cannot. Someone must stand watch. Researchers who request access today are required to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Most read 10 pages and ask to leave. A few read all 3 volumes. None of them ever have children afterward. The Caldwell farm is a subdivision now. Neat brick houses with swing sets and golden retrievers. Children play where Mary Fletcher drowned. Teenagers drink beer in the woods where Jacob Mills begged for 4 days. The cave was dynamited in 1903 after a surveyor found a child's shoe inside. Small, hand-stitched, filled with 23 preserved human eyes that had never belonged to animals. Local legend says if you walk the old farm road at 3 a.m. on the anniversary of Timothy's escape, you can still hear it. The soft, polite voice of a little boy asking if you've seen his lost calf. And sometimes, in pediatric wards and courtrooms and quiet suburban houses across America, a child looks up from a coloring book with winter blue eyes and asks a question no child should know to ask. Doctor, when someone's heart stops, do they feel it happen? The nurses always say the same thing. They say the child reminds them of someone they can never quite remember. And somewhere, in a room with no windows, a man who has not aged a day since 1868 closes a leather-bound journal, smiles the way a child smiles, when he has finally been given permission to stop pretending, and writes a new name on a fresh, blank page. The study continues. Screen fades to black. A single line appears in white text. If you felt watched while watching this, you were. Sleep well.